Welcome to Talks with Tracy, with certified hypnotherapist, life coach, and licensed mental health professional, Tracy Claremont. Tracy will share her healing journey and explore the many meaningful alternative healing methods in our world today that will support you in doing your own deepest emotional healing. So please welcome the host of Talks with Tracy, Tracy Claremont. Let the suffering end and the healing begin.
Hello and welcome to Talks with Tracy. Thank you for joining me today. I appreciate everyone who takes the time to watch the show or listen to this show. And of course, thank you to Bold Brave Television Network for having me. I'm always so very thankful for the opportunity. So now I know it's the holidays and ideally, we're full of holiday joy. I certainly want everyone to have a beautiful holiday season. And at the same time, I know that the holidays can be particularly difficult at times. And, I talked about that in the last two episodes, episodes number 45 and 46. My friend Susie Wu and I talked about how difficult it can be to be in the midst of the holidays when you're in toxic relationships and how that can actually escalate dysfunctional patterns in relationship. So if you haven't watched those already, please check them out. I do want to talk about another topic today that makes getting through the holidays and honestly just getting through life in general really, really difficult. And that is grief and grieving. So why does grief have to be so unbearably painful? So this is a question that's hits really close to home right now. Uh, my family has been through a lot of losses recently in the past few months, and it's just been really difficult. It's been a difficult time. It's been full of sadness and tears and also full of love. And, holidays can really be a trigger for loss. So I want to talk about those issues that I feel need to be talked about and brought to the surface. So I am no stranger to loss and grief. I've lost loved ones who were very close to me over the past few years. I lost my father. I lost my little sister. I lost my beloved daughter. And, my kids have lost grandparents. So regardless of how many years have passed, I still feel these waves of grief, and that's normal. So today I'm going to do my best to answer the question, why does grief feel so unbearably painful? I'm going to try not to cry while doing this because I am going to share some of my own experiences, but no promises. If I do cry, please know I will be okay. Just need a moment to regulate. So, maybe this show is to help myself. I truly hope that it helps my loved ones who are grieving. I truly hope that it helps any of you out there who are experiencing grief and loss right now. So, like I said, it can be really painful around the holidays. So what I know for certain is that this show, it comes from my heart to you. I don't think I've ever dedicated a show to anybody. Maybe the show I did where I shared my husband's story was kind of dedicated to him. But today, I really want to dedicate this episode to my beautiful niece who is going through it right now. So through all the losses that I've suffered, I never really thought about why it hurts so much. I mean, it really hurts mentally and physically. It takes a toll on our minds and our bodies. There's the obvious explanation, because we love that person and they're gone now. But just grappling with the fact that you're never going to see them again in their human form is overwhelming and certainly heartbreaking. So the fact and the truth of the matter is that every human being, every one of us will encounter death eventually. It's a part of the flow of life. And often we try to avoid that fact. I mean, you should see me and my daughter Rosa when my beautiful mom starts to talk about her own mortality. She'll say things like, when I die, I want you to have this, or I hope I'm around to see that. And every time she does that, literally me and Rosa were like, la, 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 I can't hear you, I can't hear you. we don't want to think about that time in that moment. We don't want to think about life without her. So, it's kind of like life is this river. We flow down the river of life, right? And that river comes to an end eventually, and we kind of want to like hang on, like swim over to the bank and hang on so that we don't have to deal with the end of a life. And this, what does that do to us? Avoiding grief and loss, like what does that do to us in the long run? Well, sometimes it causes us to even greater suffering to avoid it, because then it causes us to close our hearts off to connection with other people, meaningful connection, to protect ourselves from pain, the pain of loss. They say that the pain of grief is just proof that you truly loved. And I argue all the time that genuine human connection is key to our fulfilling lives, and without genuine human connection, we have a lot of suffering. So we need that. So the loss of a loved one, it just cracks us wide open. And having our hearts cracked open in this way, it is incredibly painful. But even that hurt transforms us, because if you truly look into that hurt, if you do the deep dive inward into that hurt, you really see that what you're actually experiencing is love. Nonetheless, it causes us to feel scared and lost and, just so suddenly alone when we find ourselves without our loved one. I was listening to a very touching Duncan Trussell podcast. It's a podcast that my son told me to watch, in which he was interviewing his mother, who had stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. And toward the end of the podcast, he gets emotional at the thought of losing his amazing mother. And oh my gosh, she was amazing. And she says to him, "I may leave this plane, but the love isn't going anywhere." It was so beautiful. Oh my gosh, I cried my eyes out. So although, I could talk for a whole hour about love and the pain of loss in general, or even from a perspective of spirituality, I really wanted to do it in a different way today. I wanted to answer some of the questions that I have related to loss. Specifically, what happens to us physically? Like, what is the physiology of loss? And really answer the question of what causes the physical pain, what causes our minds to become so horribly disoriented when we're grieving. Because it does. What actually happens to us when we experience the loss of someone who we were closely attached to? Why is it so hard to move on? And of course, I'd also like to offer some recommendations. I'd like to talk about what can help, what doesn't help. So that's my plan for today. So let's start by first defining what grief is and what grieving is. So grief is a noun. It's the natural response to loss, and grieving is a verb. It's the way that grief changes over time, while without actually going away. That's grieving. It's normal to have waves of grief 5, 10, 20 years down the road. There's no limit on grieving, no time limit. And, I will say that grief does get easier to manage over time. The first time you have that wave of grief, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. I don't want to be here. Sometimes people feel like they want to go with the person. They just don't want to deal with this. While the 100th time that you experience that wave of grief, it's more like, oh my gosh, this still hurts, but I'm going to get through. It just takes time to get there. Memories of our loved ones get triggered and we feel it on a deep emotional level. I know there are 2 songs in particular that always trigger an emotional response out of me when I hear them, because they were 2 songs that my daughter loved. Now, she was really competitive, a true athlete, and she always used to say, when I get married, I'm going to walk down the aisle to the song Eye of the Tiger. Now, I can remember not thinking that was the best idea, but you know what? She was going to do her. And every time I hear that song now, it triggers a wave of grief for me. And it also triggers the the loss of never seeing my daughter walk down the aisle. So these are all what memories do. Um, I do want to emphasize that there's just no identified time frame for grieving, since science hasn't narrowed that down, hasn't identified it. It's because it's all an individualized experience. It seems that our society, we tend to be overly focused on recovery and getting over it. Sometimes people can become kind of judgmental about this. And like I said, grief and grieving is very individualized. And, a lot of times people will become judgmental because they're so uncomfortable. They have their own discomfort with your experience or with the grieving person's experience. So, I just encourage people, do your best to be supportive and do it without judgment when people are grieving. So a person who's grieving the loss of a loved one is tasked with having to reconstruct their lives, somehow create a meaningful life. And with time, support, and courage, they can and will rebuild a meaningful life within this experience. But this is very scary. It's a very scary prospect and feels hopeless and unachievable when the loss is fresh. It feels like there really is no end point to the suffering, yet this person is forced into a completely new experience, a completely new reality. So what happens in our brain when we experience the loss of a loved one whom we're closely attached to? That was my question. So first off, our brains do something all the time called mapping. Now, this is not just when you're grieving, but all the time. Our brains are mapping our world. So we actually bond with those people whom we are most closely in contact with. And when we bond with someone, that bond is deeply encoded in our brains. That's the mapping. And it's this encoding that makes us know that one person in particular, is crucially important to us. It's what causes us to keep track of that person, those people that we most closely are connected to. That's not to say that you have to know where they are all the time or anything like that, but we do know in general where they are, where they're going, when they'll be back. We anticipate coming back together with them. We believe in that. And that bond is called attachment, and it is encoded in our brains with our closest relationships. So we need that bond, that attachment bond, and that encoding to have relationships. We need the belief that we will come back together with those most important people. Can you imagine sending your kid to school and not knowing if you're ever going to see them again? You wouldn't be able to do that. You wouldn't be able to leave them. So this encoding tells us, yes, we will be back together with our most important people again. It's all encoded in our brain. I mean, same with your spouse. Can you imagine sending your spouse off and not knowing if you're ever going to be together again? It would be unbearable. So Dr. Mary Frances O'Connor, she's an expert on grief and grieving. She describes attachment as an invisible tether that assures us that those whom we are attached to will come back, will be back, that they will try to find us if we're separated, and we will try to find them. And our brain actually creates the greatest neurochemistry when we are motivated to motivate us to find them and then be rewarded. The best brain chemicals are produced in that process when we come back together, when we're in the presence of our loved ones. It's really interesting. New studies in grief and neuroscience excuse me, have shown that the areas of the brain that are activated during grieving are actually related to motivation and reward. So the motivation centers and the reward centers of our brain are what is most activated in the grieving process. And not what you would typically think. I would have assumed that it would have been the emotion centers of our brain. Like during grieving, our amygdalas would be on fire and completely activated. But really, the most activated is the motivation and reward centers of our brain. So these motivation and reward parts of our brains, they are the centers that are directly related to attachment. And when activated, this is what motivates us, like I said, to go out and seek our people, our loved ones. It's a solution to being apart. Seeking is a solution to being apart, and we're motivated to go out and find them. We're rewarded with those great brain chemicals, specifically dopamine, when they're found and when we're together again. So thus the motivation and reward centers of our brains are mapped, they're encoded, they're oriented around our loved ones, and thus completely confused when a love attachment person is suddenly gone. So let's see. I think this is a good time to take a commercial break. So um, we're going to take a brief commercial break. When I come back, I'm going to be explaining all that our brains have to do to adjust to the loss of a loved one, right? That has all of this reorganizing to do. I'm going to talk about what specifically it is tasked with doing, so that we can understand why all this is so disorienting. So it's a lot. Please do a little self-care out there. I'm going to do the same, and I will see you right back here in a couple of minutes.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery, or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to easysense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's easysense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Welcome back to Talks with Tracy, coming to you live on the Bold Brave Television Network. Thank you for joining me again. So we're talking about grief and grieving today. So what happens in our brains when people who we are most closely attached to are suddenly gone, when they die? What happens to our brains? You know, when we lose a loved one, we don't suddenly become unattached to them. They still exist within our minds. And thus we're highly motivated still to seek the reward of finding them. This mapping, this encoding, it doesn't instantly change. It still functions on the belief that they are with us. Super confusing, but this process of motivational seeking and neurochemical reward when we find them, it doesn't work any longer. So our solution of going out to find them doesn't work. There is no mapping for the loss in our brain. And in fact, the existing mapping, that existing encoding, is suddenly completely ineffective. It's like obliterated, right? After a loss, we have to understand what it means to no longer have the person in our world that was regularly and consistently interacting with us. this person who provided us with the very best brain chemicals. We have to understand that they're no longer there. They've been taken away with no explanation. It's completely disorienting for our brains, and it causes us to feel scared and lost and confused, overwhelmed, desperate, sad, all of those things. So what is experienced instead is a profound sense of yearning. So what is yearning? Yearning is the primary symptom involved in grieving. Did you know that? Yearning is the state of desiring something, um, an attempt to reach out, get something that is just so extremely wanted. It's desiring something that is outside of your reach. This yearning, it persists until the brain is able to remap its orientation to the person that has been lost, and that takes time. It creates a state of pain, both physical and mental, a state of yearning, a state of wanting. It's the primary symptom of grieving. So with this understanding of how our brain maps or encodes relationships to people, we can better understand why it hurts so much and takes so long to grieve. All relationships are mapped in our brains by physical space, time spent, and closeness of attachment. So after a loss, this mapping, it has to be completely reordered in regard to that loved one. So our brains hold endless episodic memories. Now, episodic memories are conscious memories that are based upon experiences we've had, repeated experiences that we've had. We all have rich catalogs of experiences with people we are most closely connected to that are stored in our minds. Now, these episodic memories, they don't disappear with the loss of a loved one. They remain. It's an entire memory bank of where that person is in relation to us. It's like this bank, when somebody dies, it's like this bank just gets blown up in a split second. Our brain's understanding of where that person is as far as space and time is destroyed, yet our attachment persists. So our poor brain, it has to reorder this attachment as far as space and time goes, into no longer being in our space and time, into no longer being in our physical presence, no longer, and never going to return. So on the one hand, we have our logical brain knowledge that this person is dead. And on the other hand, we have this deep abiding belief that via our attachment mapping in our brain that says that they are actually still out there for us, that we can find them. We just have to seek them to be rewarded with them. It's, it's always worked before. When we sought them before, we did find them. We were rewarded with those great brain chemicals. We're still operating on that belief while our brain is doing its work in the background to remap and reorganize. Super confusing. So have you ever automatically gone to call someone who has passed away? When my little sister died, oh my gosh, I would still expect text messages every day from her. Like my phone would ping and I'd be like, oh, that's Roberta. And, I'd hear something interesting or funny and I'd go to call her or text her to share it with her. I did that over and over. Well, logically, I knew she was dead, but my mind was still expecting her to be there. And that's what my implicit memories were telling me. I would even do a double take periodically when I thought I saw her. Whenever I'd see somebody who was tall and slender with a big messy bun on top of their head, I'd be like, oh, there she is. And, was I crazy? I did feel crazy, but I wasn't. I wasn't crazy. I understand now that my brain was automatically looking for her. My brain had to learn to predict her absence rather than her presence. And this took a long time. When we lose someone, we have to relearn, remap our minds to predict their absence instead of their presence. So, our brains regularly make predictions based upon past experience. And our minds are actually prediction machines. So it stands to reason that our brains would start making prediction errors when our loved one is no longer with us. It makes inaccurate guesses. So that person, they're supposed to be there. It's not a good prediction to make that they're never coming back. This goes against our survival when we put it in terms of attachment. It doesn't make sense. We need other humans to survive. So when this encoding around attachment, with this encoding around attachment, a person moves from being an individual to being a we, to being our we. We move from being an individual to being a we. So whenever separation from our we happens, it causes a reaction in our brains. So once we become a we, it means that we are going to respond when that other half of the we is missing. And technically speaking, this results in an increase in cortisol, stress hormone, when our we is missing, and a decrease in oxytocin. Oxytocin is sometimes referred to as the love hormone. So bad feelings go up, good feelings go down when our we is missing. So even more simply put, it's like that feeling when you get when you're with your toddler in a public space. Say you're in Walmart with your toddler and you're shopping and you suddenly look down and your toddler is missing. They're gone. What do? Well, you panic and you automatically go to seek them out. You go to find them. Where are they? We look for them. That's an automatic reaction that happens in the brain when you're attached, when your we is missing. So when your we dies, your brain has that same automatic panic reaction, only over and over and over and over. And it is also coupled with a despair reaction related to knowing that they're never coming back. So just picture that. Can you imagine having that automatic panic reaction that you have when your toddler is suddenly missing over and over and over and over again, coupled with the despair of never returning? Ugh, it's awful. So naturally, all of this makes it extremely difficult to function in our daily living. Dr. Mary Frances O'Connor, the expert on grief and grieving that I mentioned earlier, she likens the bereaved brain to a computer. So you know how when you're trying to write a Word document, but your computer is uploading other information and your computer starts to glitch, like the letters don't go out as they're typing, maybe a whole sentence gets spit out all at once. There's a glitch, right? And this actually happened to me on one of my shows where my computer was uploading in the background. So the picture for my whole show was super blurry. It was because there was information uploading in the background. I didn't realize that. It was glitching. It was fuzzy. It was impaired. Well, our brains do the same thing. Our brains glitch. They become fuzzy when we're uploading this new information or downloading information. I never know if it's uploading or downloading, but anyway, information is coming in with this new experience. It impacts our ability, our cognitive functioning. It makes it glitchy, fuzzy, impaired. We can't think, we can't remember, we can't concentrate. We have trouble being present. We're largely unaware of things happening around us in these moments of grieving, especially initially. So I can remember when my dad died, I thought I was handling it pretty well. I had a whole house full of kids at home, my kids who are now adults. And one day, like I said, I thought I was doing okay. One day, my son had a t-ball game, and his dad went to take him to the t-ball game. And I wasn't able to leave the house yet. And when he got there, Lane, my son, he said, "I can't put my mitt on. My hand hurts." So his dad looks at his hand, and that poor child had a whole wood chip underneath his thumbnail that was horribly infected. Oh my gosh, he had to go to the ER and have his thumbnail removed to heal it. Oh my gosh. So had he told me about his thumb? I'm sure he did. Do I remember that? No. Did I tend to it? No. I was unavailable. My mind was glitching. I was super fuzzy. So I still kind of feel bad about that today. So I apologize to you, Lynn. So sorry. So thankfully, over time, we do update, and these cognitive impairments do go away. Grieving never goes away. There's always going to be periodic waves, but at least our minds are able to clear and our executive functioning comes back. Even the waves of grief become less frequent over time. But understanding this mapping and encoding, it really helps me to understand why I have a harder time around my daughter's birthday than I do around the anniversary of her death. And it makes sense to me now that that's because I have it encoded in my brain that her birthday was my experience with her. It was her day, just about her. And it was encoded, a celebration of her. So that makes sense to me. It also explains why I have experienced significant deaths in my life in a different way, because I have different attachment relationships with each one. So before we take a break, I just want to say another thing that I learned is that, and I stand corrected on, is that grieving is different from depression. I previously thought grieving and depression was the same thing. And I'm a mental health therapist. I didn't realize that they activate different parts of our brain. And this is why antidepressants don't work for grieving people. So grieving and depression, they can have similar symptoms and run parallel to each other. Depression can travel alongside of grief, but it is not grief. They're different circuitries. And that's why antidepressants don't work for grieving people. All right, so it's already time to take another commercial break. When I come back, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, and also what can help, what does help, what doesn't help to move this process of grieving along in a healthy way. So you're watching Talks with Tracy on Bold Brave Television Network. We'll be right back.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like, it was almost instant. Like, I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back to Talks with Tracy, with me, Tracy Claremont, coming to you live on the Bold Brave Television Network. We're talking about grief and grieving and why it is so unbearably painful. I'd like to also talk about some ways that, some things that can help, some things that are not helpful, some things that, maybe we should stay away from. So, we established the fact that our brains are using our most powerful brain chemicals to motivate us to seek out our loved ones. And it doesn't change just because we lose our loved ones. There's dopamine, oxytocin, there's cortisol, stress hormones created. And remember how I said that when a bond is formed, it becomes encoded in our brains. Well, did you know that it is scientifically proven that this encoding around attachment and the experience of grieving is so powerful and impactful that it even creates epigenetic changes in us? I mean, no wonder it's such a hard thing to deal with. Epigenetic changes are chemical modifications in our DNA that regulate our gene activity. This is like no joke. So, have you ever heard of intergenerational loss and trauma? That's something that has been studied in our Native American communities. It's been studied in Holocaust survivors. I mean, my God, no wonder it's so hard to get through the grieving process. It can even affect us on an epigenetic level. So anyway, I could totally go down that rabbit hole too, but I'm going to stay focused. So one of the commonly talked about and commonly used models in grief and grieving groups, support groups, and whatnot, is the work of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who talks about the 5 stages of grief. She talks about denial and anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. I agree that all of those things are present in grieving. The thing that I don't necessarily agree with is that it is a model that implies that there is a linear process to grieving, and that's just not true. We can experience all these different stages. We can experience one, hop to the end, go to the middle, all over the place in our grieving experience. I mean, we may even completely skip a stage altogether, like anger. Maybe somebody skips the anger stage. I didn't skip the anger stages. I mean, especially when my daughter died. Holy cow. I stayed in that anger stage for a long time. But maybe other people do. It's all an individualized process. Everybody experiences it differently, and you may just jump all over the place. And I think as humans, we tend to want to assign a linear experience so that we can feel like we're going to get to the end. But it's just not like that. All right. So one thing that we know for sure is not helpful is how our society tends to pass judgment on the grieving process. Our society, we tend to pathologize normal human experiences. We do it all the time, especially emotional experiences. And again, in my opinion, there's no normal. There's no normal grieving process. There's no normal to a timeline. It's just like there's no average human experience. What is that? Who is the average human? Who knows? So grieving, again, it's just very individualized. I love how Mary Frances O'Connor, again, Dr. Mary Frances O'Connor, she sarcastically refers to this imaginary, invisible, big book of how to express grief. Of course, there is no such thing. There is no big book like that, but people tend to act as though there is some kind of rule book around grieving. And people tend to, pass judgment. Like, why are they still crying? Why aren't they crying? Shouldn't they be over it by now? Why are they already dating? Shouldn't they be in therapy? Why are they still in therapy? On and on and on. Just all these judgments. So, and even worse than other people judging is when we, the grieving person, judges ourselves. Oh my gosh. I can remember the first time after my daughter passed away. I can remember the first time I felt happiness. Oh my gosh. I was appalled with myself. How dare I feel happiness? My daughter was dead. What kind of mother experiences happiness after their child has died? And I chastised myself, and I immediately went back to that place of despair, that immediately grieving despair. I felt guilty if I had a good day. Now, this was actually a sign of healing. It was actually a good sign, but I adamantly fought against that healing, and that wasn't good for me. That caused me to be stuck and not move through my grieving process. So I don't recommend that. These are, difficult moments, and you just need to be received with kindness and compassion, around all of these things. So maybe my hope is that sharing my experience, I can maybe save you from some of that if you're in your grieving, and give you permission to have good days. I encourage you to have good days. It's okay. It doesn't mean that you love them any less or miss them any less. So also, what about social media? Social media creates this kind of confusion, in my opinion, around grief and grieving. Now, people, I am a grown-ass woman. I didn't grow up with social media, yet I still feel this weird pressure to post something around my daughter's birthday or around the anniversary of her death. That's not really my style. I tend to be a more private person. I know I'm sharing my story here, but I actually am a pretty private person. I turn to my closest people when I am needing to express. I don't turn to social media. Yet I feel the pressure to post something like, oh my gosh, other people are putting things out there. Other people are acknowledging this day. I have to do that so that everybody knows I love my daughter, or I love my sister, that I haven't forgotten her, that I still miss her. I feel that pressure. So I have actually, for myself and my own well-being, made a strong commitment to myself to not look at social media for the week before and the week after those anniversaries and those birthdays and dates, because I don't want to have that feeling. And I always remind myself, those who know me and who are close to me absolutely know that I love and miss my loved ones who have passed. I don't have to prove it on social media, but it just makes me think of kids these days and what they experience. So it's irrational thinking. I know that, yet it's there. It's confusing. So again, it takes many, many weeks, months of remapping, relearning, re-experiencing life without your loved one in space and time, understanding that they're not coming back. We now have to learn that we also have to learn that it's not going to destroy us, that we're going to survive without them, even if we feel like we don't really want to, we're going to. And I'm so thankful that my one daughter was a baby when my other daughter passed away. So she was 1 year old, and she literally was the reason I got up in the morning. Now, I had other children. My other kids were in the home. I have lots of kids. They were adults. Others were adults. But my other two kids were 11 and 16 at home. And then I had a 1 year old. My 11 and 16-year-old, they could get up and they could feed themselves and they could go to school and they could do those things without me. But my 1 year old, she couldn't. I had to do those things for her, and I honestly feel like she saved my life in those early days. I lived for her because she needed me to take care of her. And so what I want to say is, if you're just living for your children in those moments, then live for your children. Do whatever you need to do to get through your days, and put one foot in front of the other. It's all okay. It will get better, and eventually you'll learn to live with the grief. Eventually we figure out how to have a meaningful life while living within the waves of grief. So what is helpful? The goal that we're working to achieve, in technical terms, is actually separating from space and time in regard to our loved one, while still maintaining the attachment to the loved one. It's tricky. It's normal to want to avoid that separation. It's normal to do things that avoid the reality. It's normal to ruminate also in these moments as well. So avoiding means trying to distract and not think about the loss, while rumination means just the opposite, endlessly thinking about the loss. And it's normal to go between these two. I don't want to say ways of coping. Well, they are unhealthy ways of coping. Doing both to an extent actually is okay, but if we do either one of them excessively, then it is not helpful and it's actually maladaptive. So an example of being overly avoidant is when a person stays overly busy, is hyper distracted, maybe uses substances to not deal with the pain of it all. Those things are maladaptive and not helpful, because it interferes with that remapping process that needs to take place, and it actually prolongs your grief, because that remapping has to take place in order for you to get to the other side. Rumination, also not helpful. This is when you fall into those traps of, if only, I should have, they should have, they were supposed to, I could have changed it. It's when we make up these stories and we end our stories with, then they'd still be alive. Oh my goodness, this is not helpful at all in our journey of accepting. It's super hard to stay out of these traps when you experience the death of a loved one from suicide, which I know all too well. I've fallen into these traps before. So in fact, we need to stay in the present moment with our thoughts, even when it's painful. Our brains must have the grief experience in order to move forward. So sleep is important. The appropriate amount of sleep is always important, even if you're not grieving, because this is when our minds are reorganizing. So it's particularly important during the grief process. Now, I know a lot of times falling asleep isn't the problem because we're so exhausted. It's the waking up that is the problem, because then we wake up to our reality of them not being there. So I understand that sleep can have its challenges, but nonetheless, sleep is important because sleep facilitates the reordering of the neural connections, and it helps our bodies establish a healthy cortisol level. That's that stress hormone level. We don't want our bodies to be consumed with stress. Super hard, but we want to try to avoid that. So what else is helpful? Sunlight on our skin. It's another thing that helps our bodies to regulate our cortisol rhythm. Cortisol, again, stress hormone, stress chemical in our body. If it gets too high when we're grieving, it can cause irregular heart rates, irregular rhythms. It can cause high blood pressure. It can create a toxic internal environment in our bodies. So also, it stands to reason that relaxation would be important as well. Again, I know these things are really hard. I'm not trying to minimize. I'm just saying that these are really helpful. Putting effort into relaxing our nervous system is important. Doing deep breathing relaxes our nervous system. Humming relaxes our nervous system because our voice box is really close to our main nerve that goes down our spine. And that vibration helps us to relax. So, calming our body, slowing down our heart rates in these moments is important. So all the while, we're doing those things, all the while we're trying to accept that our loved one will never be with us again, that they're never going to exist within our same space and time. We need to accept that while anchoring to the attachment that we still have. We can keep that attachment. We just have to accept that they're no longer in our space and time. Sometimes writing about our loved ones and the relationship that you had can be helpful for this anchoring, just as long as you stay away in your writing, stay away from that. I wish I had, if only I should have, those kind of, again, those kind of ways of thinking that assigns the ending, then you'd still be alive. Don't write about that. Write about your feelings, your relationship, what you can write about what you miss about them, what you loved, what they gave you. All of those things are good to maintain the attachment. And also it can be good to just process those thoughts and feelings in writing. It's always good to do that. All right. So it's this complicated process of letting go while still holding on. I will mention that there's a small percentage of people who don't show change over time, who are not able to restore their life into a meaningful manner that incorporates the grief. This is a small percentage. And these are people who have grief that doesn't get better over time. It just doesn't change. And in this case, a person is really recommended to seek some help, seek some mental health therapy, groups for grieving people, those kind of things. Mental health therapy can be really helpful for those who are not stuck in the grief process, who are just moving through the grief process. It feels good to get support. It feels good to be with someone who can hold your emotional pain and just be completely objective in it. Therapists, they can offer ideas for your toolbox for getting through, coping skills. A therapist, it can be that person that stands by you while you jump in and out of the mud and the muck of those stages of grief. They can be there. They can help you reconstruct and reorganize a new meaningful life around the experiences you're having. A therapist can help you to let go of that guilt and shame that sometimes comes with moving on and being happy again. Yeah, leading a fulfilled life. So social support, of course, also is of the greatest importance. Outcomes for moving through the grieving process are much better for those who have kind, loving support around them. Now, I can't imagine going through grieving without others who are kind and loving around you. Thankfully, that wasn't my experience. If that's been your experience, I feel deeply for you. How awful. So if you don't have people in your immediate surroundings, then I would recommend that you seek out those people. Seek out groups of people who are also grieving. If your spouse has died, seek out a support group for widows. Seek out a friend who has the same experience, preferably somebody who's farther along in the grieving process, because you don't want to be at the same point at the same time. That may be less helpful. But social support, for sure, spiritual beliefs, religious beliefs, all of those things can offer reassurance and comfort to us. We can do spiritual kind of cleanses. I know that my sister mentioned to me that she went and did a sweat house experience. That's, praying in a sweat house. That was really cleansing for her and really helpful. Do those things, whatever is meaningful to you. And, pray. Speak to your higher power. Talk to those people who have passed. You can still talk to them, in my opinion. I know these are my own beliefs, but they can still hear you. They're still all around us. It's just simply too difficult to go through alone. So surround yourself as best you can with supportive people. And, if you're trying to help someone close to you who is grieving, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for the love and the support you're showing them. You are literally handing them a lifeline. Stay connected to them. It can be difficult to listen to a grieving person's pain. It can be really difficult, especially if the person who died was close to you as well and you're grieving as well. So just remember, there's never any expectation to cheer up a grieving person. There's nothing you can do to cheer up a grieving person. There's nothing you can do or say. Rather, your job is to bear witness to what is happening, what they're going through, and reassure them that they're not alone. And maybe they can't see that they will eventually restore a life that is meaningful, that has purpose, that makes sense, but you can see that for them, and you can reassure them that you can see that one day, and you can tell them that you'll be there for them each and every step of the way. You can tell them that you're willing to stay in it with them, be by their side as they're going through it, and you'll be there when they reach that day where they have restored a meaningful life. All right, so and then just one final thought in regard to this part of the talk. I come from a Native American community. We like to feed each other. Stop by with a meal. It's really hard to feed your kids and your family when you're grieving, because it's hard to think of what, organize a meal. So stop by with food. We like to feed people. So in the last few minutes that I have here, I just want to say that we can't talk about loss without talking about love. That's why I have talked about love a lot today. Grief is it's so painful, yet it is a beautiful expression of love. And when you love someone, it not only changes your life, I don't know if you knew this, but it actually physiologically changes your brain. it physically changes your brain. Because of that person, your brain is different in good ways. And in this way, in a kind of weird way, we physically have a marker from that relationship and the impact it had on our lives. It's kind of strange, but true. So when they're gone, we eventually learn to live with that grief. We do. We reconstruct our lives. We build our new reality around this, and we slowly but surely begin to appreciate all that came with that relationship. So, um, we get to a place where we can give that same love that we experience with them to other people, the other we's in our life, right? And this perhaps is the greatest gift of all that is left behind by our loved ones, a beautiful expression of love that was taught by them, that we learned from them. I was taught by the love from my dad. I learned from the love of my daughter. I was gifted with the love of my sister, and now I get to bring that love, that same love, to the world in honor of their memory. All right, so we're almost out of time. So, I love to share words that are spoken by other people. So I am going to end the show today with a quote from my beloved niece, who is in it. She actually said, "Love is sacred. I always believed that. I cherished our love so deeply." Oh my gosh, I'm getting emotional. Okay, I made it all the way to the end. She said, "Love is sacred. I always believed that. I cherished our love so deeply. Hold on to your partners. Kiss them and hug them. Give thanks to the color they bring to your life." Whew, such a beautiful expression of love and gratitude. Made it all the way to the end without crying. Regulating. Thank you for watching today. I appreciate it so much. I hope this has been helpful. I know it was helpful to me. I hope it's helpful to all of you. So I'm going to take a little holiday break. I am going to spend some time with my family, and I'm going to spend some time setting my path for the coming year. So I will be back with a new show on January 9th. Until then, happy holidays. I hope you have a beautiful, beautiful holiday season. And I will be back ringing in the new year with you on January 9th. So until then, this has been Talks with Tracy, coming to you live on Bold Brave Television Network. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.
This has been Talks with Tracy. Join us each week as Tracy and her guests will come together and realize that underneath it all, we are all the same and never alone. So join us each week and let Talks with Tracy be your safe place to land in your healing journey. Right here, Thursdays, 11 a.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network.